Here at the Republican Liberty Caucus, we bill ourselves as the conscience of the Republican Party. We hold our elected officials accountable, and we stand for principle over party always. This tends to make us not very popular with those who profit from backroom deals or a party apparatus that seems to go out of its way to step all over the grassroots. But guess what? Our message now is more popular than ever. The message of liberty, constitutional rights, freedom, capitalism is more popular than ever. The Republican Liberty Caucus is 100% grassroots, all volunteer, no paid staff. Look around the room today. We have put together an event that is almost as large as the New Hampshire State GOP convention, and we're completely grassroots with no paid staff. So that goes to show, I think, that the liberty message is more popular than ever. Sadly, the current list of elected officials who stand tall for liberty in the Constitution is pretty short. So it is my great pleasure and honor today to introduce Senator Rand Paul to you all. Thank you.
by that. Amen, Joe? He said, well, my granddad lived to be 105. And I said, well, your granddad didn't live to be 105 eating like that. And he said, nope, he lived to be 105 by minding his own business. I think maybe that's what joins us all together. We may not agree on everything, but we kind of want a government that minds its own business. I want a government that basically leaves me alone. Leaves me alone in my personal life, leaves me alone in my business, just stays the heck out of my affairs. In fact, I believe in it so strongly that I stood for 10.5 hours on the Senate floor for your and my right to be left alone. Justice Brandeis said that the most cherished of rights to civilized men and women is the right to be left alone. One of the interesting things about that statement, it was in a dissent. There was a Supreme Court case called the Olmstead case. You know what the Supreme Court decided? The Supreme Court decided that your phone conversations had no expectation of privacy. This was in 1928. They got it wrong. Justice Brandeis got it right. You have the right to be left alone. For 60 years, the government listened to your phone conversations. And it was wrong, but the government did it anyway. But 60 years later, finally in the 1960s, we reversed that. One of the things I'm fascinated about our country is the stability to last long enough to figure out when we get things wrong. And some of the most famous Supreme Court cases of all time are the ones where we have famous dissents, when the majority actually gets it wrong. Randy Barnett is an advisor of mine who teaches at Georgetown, and much of what he talks about when he talks about judicial engagement is that it is the prerogative and the duty of the judiciary to protect our liberty. They should overturn laws that invade our liberty. But sometimes they get it wrong. They got it wrong in the case saying they could listen to your phone conversations. They got it wrong later in the 1970s when they said they can collect your phone records. That's where we are now. So when the other side stands up and says, oh no, there's no Fourth Amendment protection to your phone records, that's actually what the court has ruled. But this is a bad place to be. So I stood for 10.5 hours to say, you know what? The people need to stand up and make sure that government knows we don't want you in our records. And here's what the government responds. The government responds and says, well, we're collecting them all, we're just not looking at them. Believe us. You can believe us. You can trust us. We're not looking at them. We're just collecting your records. But the people who are telling you that they're just collecting them and not looking at them, James Clapper. He's the guy who showed up in front of the Senate and said they weren't doing it at all. So the guy that denied the existence of the very program is now saying, trust us. We're from the government. Trust us. We won't look. But I try to think of the analogy to our Founding Fathers, and I think of the Founding Fathers and how upset they were that the British soldiers were writing their own warrants. See, it's a big deal to let the police or soldiers write warrants. This has been going on since the Patriot Act was written. We allow police and soldiers to write warrants in our country. It is directly opposed to what our Founding Fathers were in favor of limiting. The British soldiers were writing warrants, but they were also writing a special kind of warrant, a generalized warrant. Nobody's name was on the warrant. They could just go to anybody's house. Why? Because they were trying to collect taxes. Sound familiar? Big government can't get enough of your money, and they can't do it in a legal way, so they're going to do it in an illegal way. But when I think of the analogy to the current system, I think, well, do you think the colonists would have said, well, that Tea Party thing, that's kind of risky, and we don't have the votes. And my goodness, we just can't stand up because the government might shut down, and we might as well not try. And besides, the British soldiers are saying they're just collecting our papers, they're not looking at them. Think about it. People say, well, they're not violating your rights because they're not reading and looking at your phone records. It's the act of collection that is the invasion of your privacy. They're doing things you can't imagine they're doing. They're doing things they won't tell me what they're doing. They tell people in the Intelligence Committee many things they don't tell us. Senator Wyden knew for years about some of this. But if he tells, they accuse him of being a traitor. He got this from the Intelligence Committee, but he kept asking the questions and asking the question. In fact, he's very brave because he finally asked Clapper the question that came with the information. Are you collecting in bulk our phone records? And Clapper said no. He committed perjury. He should not be in office, and we've lost confidence in our government, what confidence we had remaining in our government and our intelligence agencies if they will lie about what they are actually looking at. We find out now that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, everything's a mouthful, they're collecting all your credit card statements. 90 to 95% of your credit card statements. Think about what the government can know about you through your credit card statement. They can know whether you drink, whether you smoke, whether you gamble, and how much. They can tell what you read, what books you read, what magazines you subscribe to. They can tell who your doctors are, what your medicines are. Think about how much of your world goes through your credit card now, and should the government be collecting those records? But once again, they say we're sort of itemizing them and looking for trends here and there. We want to know about you, but we're not putting your name. We're not looking up your name. There was something just last week of people abusing their authority to look after their enemies. This goes on. Some people have looked after old girlfriends' records or old boyfriends' records. It happens all the time. It's the power and the thought that we might abuse the power, that government might abuse the powers while we stop the government, while we restrain the government. The talk at the time of the Constitution and our founding was not that the Constitution would be to restrain the people, but that the Constitution was to restrain the government. This was very clear to our founders. Right now we have a government, though, that is literally run amok. People ask me, they say, what is the worst problem? What's the worst thing President Obama has done? And I say, well, how long do you have? But it really isn't this particular bill. It's not Obamacare or Dodd-Frank or even some of the stuff they've done with the NSA. If you want to talk about it in overall terms, what's the worst thing the president's doing to the country? It's the collapse of the separation of powers. We had checks and balances, and it was this marvelous system that our founders put in place. Madison put it this way. Madison said that we would pit ambition against ambition. The ambition of Congress to hang on or gain more power would be pitted against the power of the presidency, the ambition of the president to gain more power. But you know what you have now? You have a minuscule, a tiny, tiny, impotent, and inconsequential Congress. And I'm embarrassed that I'm even part of it. We exert nothing. We do nothing. The power of the purse. What were you promised? They said elect Republicans. Elect Republicans and we'll stop this nonsense. So we did. We elected Republicans to the House and to the Senate. What'd you get for it? Nothing. We have the power of the purse. People are now saying, and I think they're confused on this, we need to end the 60-vote majority in the Senate. We need to end it because we can't stop anything. No, we need to use it to our advantage. Do you know if we would just stand up and say, let's let all spending expire. What does that mean? Just let it all expire. You can restart it as soon as you want to. You can restart it 1 second later. But once all spending expires, you know what happens? The people who want to spend money have to affirmatively get the votes. A majority in the House and typically 60 votes in the Senate. So what are some of the things we might get rid of? Where to start? $800,000 we spent in the last couple years on developing a televised cricket league in Afghanistan. What? They don't even have televisions in Afghanistan. 1 in 10,000 people have a television, and yet they took $800,000 of your money to broadcast a televised cricket league for Afghanistan. Do you know that we have spent more in Afghanistan than the entire Marshall Plan after World War II? We had an accidental bombing of a hospital the other day, and it makes me sick. Some people want to blame the soldiers. I know, but I have relatives who are soldiers. I don't want to blame the soldiers, but I sure as hell want to blame the policymakers. Why the hell are we bombing anybody in Afghanistan? Why the hell are we there? And I was for initially being there. I don't think we can let people attack us like 9/11. I think we do have to push back. We have to stop them and show them what will happen if you attack us. But that was 15 years ago. The people who attacked us are all dead. We're in prison.
Or retired.
Or retired. Or in enforced seclusion somewhere. Vacation in Tora Bora in the caves. But the thing is for the most part, I have trouble understanding what our mission would be in Afghanistan now. And so, how do you think the soldiers feel? The soldiers are told to fight like this. The soldiers are told to drop a bomb, and they do their job. But the thing is it's a terrible mistake to bomb a hospital. You know, and it happened because we're involved with a war that's long over. We're involved in a war where the mission's long gone. And people say, well, they won't step up and defend themselves. Well, then maybe they don't want a country. I mean, we liberated them, and 15 years later, they're not willing to fight for it. I don't think we know. In this country, we say, well, we don't want to... In this country, we say, well, we don't want people to be on welfare their whole life because it'll take away their ambition, so we want them to get back to work. But they only get the ambition if you end what you're giving them. At some point, there has to be an end. You think maybe the same could be said for foreign aid? You think the same could be said for what we're doing in Afghanistan? I introduced an amendment to get rid of foreign aid to Egypt. I've tried all different variations with the Muslim brother that took over. I said, well, they don't seem to be very friendly to us. And maybe we ought to start with ending aid to those who hate us. Seems reasonable. It's hard to get a vote in the Senate at any point in time, but I finally got a vote, and we got 22 votes. That was, I think at the time, about a little bit less than half of the Republicans. At one point I said, why don't we have an amendment to a bill, and I got a vote on this in the committee, why don't we have an amendment to a bill that says if a country persecutes Christians, maybe they shouldn't get any of our money. It seemed pretty reasonable to me. I haven't been anywhere in America where anybody believes we ought to give money to a country that's persecuting Christians. And you say, well, how do you define that? Well, there are many countries that have the death penalty if you criticize the state religion. That sounds like persecuting Christians or any other minority religion that's not the state religion. So we looked at countries that would put people to death for that. In fact, in Pakistan, there is a woman, Asia Bibi. She's been on death row for 5 years because she went to draw water at the well, and the fellow women in the village began chanting, "Death, death to the Christian." And they beat her with stones and rocks, and she's bleeding and thinks she's going to die. Finally, the police come. She thinks she's been rescued, and they arrest her. And she's now on death row because the local women said she was criticizing the state religion. So I introduced this in the Foreign Relations Committee, and 18 people voted to continue, and 2 people voted to stop sending aid to countries that are persecuting Christians. If you introduce that anywhere in America, what do you think the vote is? Probably 99% of Americans would say, why would we give money to countries that are persecuting Christians around the world? We've got this big new problem going on in Syria, though, and we need to think about it because we're going to choose who the next nominee is. So what do you have? If you ask almost anybody on the stage, probably virtually everyone else on the stage, what should we do? What's Carly Fiorina say? Use force. We need to be ready to use force against Russia. We need a no-fly zone. She says, let's quit talking to Putin. Let's stop talking to Putin. And it's like, have these people read any history? Are they aware that during the entire Cold War, we kept open communications with the Russians? Are they aware that Gorbachev was a communist? Are they aware that Reagan talked to Gorbachev? They all love Reagan, but none of them understand that Reagan continued to speak to communists. He actually ended up negotiating with them. But he never said, I'm not going to talk to you. And he never went to a region of the world and said, we're going to have a red line in the sky, and anybody that crosses it will be the beginning of World War III. And people say, well, we can't let Russia supplant us in the Middle East. Well, how did we get to the point where we are? How did we get to this point? When we had the Iraq War and Saddam Hussein fell, what happened? We kept pouring trillions of dollars in there. We stayed for 15 years. And how did the Iraqis repay us? Let's see. They became great bosom buddies with Iran. And so now they're great bosom buddies with Iran and Syria. And who's their next best friend? Russia. So recently Russia came in with heavy equipment, soldiers, and all of this into Syria. They had to fly over Iraq. What did Iraq say? Come on. Now recently they've been bombing over there, and we're annoyed because they're bombing targets that may or may not be ISIS, and so we want them to stop. But you know who's encouraging them? The government in Iraq. We spent $1 trillion on this government, and they like Iran better than us, and Russia better than us. I think maybe we didn't spend the money well. Maybe So we think, well, you know, there are many in our party. Hopefully they're not invited to your conference. There are many in our party who say, we will project power by giving people all this money. Well, it just doesn't even appear to be true. One, we don't have the money. We've got to borrow it from China to send it to Pakistan. So we don't have the money, and yet they say send more. If we just would send more, we could have more influence. But look, we've been in Iraq for 15 years. We give them $1 trillion, and who do they like better? Russia and Iran. Doesn't seem to have worked. We do have an American interest, and we do have to defend American interests. I've been very harsh on Hillary Clinton because she didn't defend Benghazi. We have a consulate in Erbil. We have to defend it. You have to make a decision. If you're staying, defend it. If you're coming home and it's the middle of war, you may have to. But if you're going to be there, defend it. We have an embassy in Baghdad, an enormous embassy in Baghdad. If we're going to have people there, we have to defend it. But that doesn't mean that we have to have American boots on the ground. And I'm the one person on the stage who'll say, if there needs to be boots on the ground, let's let them be Arab boots on the ground. We had a big debate a week or so ago in Congress. And in the debate, we are debating over what's called a continuing resolution. What is a continuing resolution? It's more of the same. It's just putting all of the bills together in one bill. So instead of individually voting on the different programs, we just put them all together. So I went to the floor and I was kind of annoyed, and I told him it was a steaming pile of the same old, same old. I thought it was the best way to put it. It's a bunch of crap. We're putting all of this together in one bill, and nothing gets better. It continues more of the same. What would happen if we let it expire? The 800 grand for the cricket league would fall away because you would need the 60 votes to pass anything. See, the 60-vote majority, the fact that in the Senate you only get anything done with 60 votes because it can be filibustered, it can be used to your advantage. Instead of everybody saying, no, we're defeated, we can't do anything, we have the Congress, we have the Senate, we have the House, but we can't do anything until we win the presidency. And then when we get that, you know what they'll tell you next? We can't do anything until we have 60 votes in the Senate. But you know what? We have every bit of power, we just have no courage. All we need is the courage to let all the spending expire. Let it expire. And a second later, we can restart it. But when we restart it, the other side will be required to get 60 votes. What are some of the things that they would be required to get 60 votes for? Well, let's see. Last year we spent 250 grand bringing 24 kids from Pakistan to space camp in Alabama. Now if you want to do that, fine, send your money. But we shouldn't be borrowing money to bring kids here from Pakistan and send them to space camp. We spent $300,000 studying whether or not Japanese quail are more sexually promiscuous on cocaine. I don't know about you, but I think we could have polled the audience on that. It's sort of like what lawyers say, I'll stipulate to that. We could go on and on, get one of those waste books. But why does waste continue? When you read these outrageous things, a while back somebody came up, I think it was $7 billion worth of waste and duplication. And you think, well, someone discovered it, who could dispute it, and who would vote for it? We don't ever vote for it. I've been there 5 years and I've never voted for or against anything, individually. What I'm given is a steaming pile of the same old, all wrapped up in one bill and all of the spending. So I never have a vote even on the department that is spending money on Japanese quail and their sexual habits. Never get to vote on that. It's tied up in a big bundle called a continuing resolution. So a continuing resolution is an abandonment. It's an abandonment of congressional power, and this is what's happened. We've allowed all the power to go to the executive. See, we complain, we say, President Obama is doing this through executive order. Stop it. All we have to do is quit sending the money. We have the power of the purse, and we're not using it. People are unhappy. I've been traveling the country and I meet Republicans everywhere. They are very unhappy with Washington, and justifiably so. See, it seems that we can't even cut the funding for one program. We do not have the ability to cut the funding for any programs. We just immediately and preemptively announce our defeat. But you know what they will have the power to do? They always have the power to pass a continuing resolution. Somehow they find 60 votes to continue spending money. They have the power to continue borrowing it. Debt ceiling vote's going to come up. The Republican Party that you elected doesn't have the power to cut one measly old program, but they've got somehow the will to continue to borrow money. They have the will to raise the debt ceiling. And so it just continues on and on. You know what I say? Cut up the credit card. Let's quit borrowing money. The question people need to ask, though, when we want to determine who our nominee is, we need to ask, how did we get in this fix? And how come when Republicans get in charge, it seems to get bad also? We were in charge for 8 years and the debt doubled. Now, admittedly, the debt's getting worse under a Democrat president. We're going to add more debt under President Obama than all the previous presidents combined. But when we were in charge, we added entitlement programs. We doubled the debt. We made the Department of Education bigger. We added No Child Left Behind, which means we added more money to federal and centralized control of education. And so why does the debt get bigger under Republicans? And do you want to be part of a party that says, oh, we're the party of adding debt less quickly? I'll go home. If that's what we're for, I'm going back home. I want to be for something dramatic. I want to be for something that says, you know what? Let's only spend what comes in. To understand the problem in Washington, you have to understand that there is an unholy alliance. The right and the left are really in league. They get together behind closed doors and they shake hands. What's the alliance? What's the secret deal? The secret deal is that military always gets what they want, and so does welfare. They all want to do it. What have you heard from leadership? We're going to bust the budget caps. What does that mean? The caps are on military and domestic spending, and they have to be there. We've got to have caps or we're going to spend ourselves into oblivion. Even if you think national defense is the most important thing we do, as I do, I think it's the most important thing we do, but it can't be unlimited funds. We are not stronger from bankruptcy court. We are weaker if we keep miring ourselves in all of this debt. But the unholy alliance is right and left get together. I'll give you an example. We had a vote on the budget probably about 3 months ago. And Senator Rubio and Senator Cruz and several others brought forward an amendment. They wanted to add $190 billion to the defense budget. It's like a 33% increase in the defense budget. And I said, whoa, that's a lot of money. And I said, if you really need it, why don't we put it up, and we'll put it up there with offsetting cuts. So you'd have the money you say that you need, but we'd actually cut a corresponding amount from the domestic spending. I'm the only one that voted for my amendment. I mean, 4 or 5 people did, but none of the other people running for president voted for offsetting cuts. They were for expanding defense, but without contracting domestic spending. You can't do it. That is part of the unholy alliance. This is the right and left getting together, and it's why we're never going to balance the budget. We're never going to get out of debt. We're never going to make government smaller until we wake up and send a message to Republicans and Democrats that enough's enough. If we want to win again, we have to be a bigger, broader party. We need to be a party with earrings and without earrings, with tattoos and without tattoos, with ponytails and without ponytails. We've got to look like the rest of America. And one of the ways we can look like the rest of America is defending justice for everyone. White, The war on drugs has been devastating to the country, but particularly to poor people in our country. If you look at marijuana arrests, 15 to 1, black to white. But if you look at usage, white kids are using it at about the same frequency as black kids. And I'm not an advocate. I'm not here to advocate. I'm just here to advocate for justice. And I can guarantee you, you go into any black community anywhere in the country and they'll tell you that it's true. In Ferguson, there are 60 black men for every 100 black women. You go into Baltimore, it's devastation. Their men are gone because we've rounded them up and arrested them. For nonviolent crime, we have to choose a different way. We've got to figure out a different way than putting people in jail. It's not the way we should treat drug addiction or drug problems with jail. Incarceration. The Fifth and Sixth Amendment are about justice. The Fifth Amendment says they can't take your property from you without due process. You need to do a little splaining to that fellow with the hat and orange hair, because here's the thing. This is the fundamental building block of capitalism, is property. That's where capital comes from. Most of it's borrowed against property. Security of title is one of the most important fundamental building blocks of capitalism. And yet we have a major candidate leading our party who says he loves using eminent domain to take private property from small property owners to give it to big corporations, coincidentally like his casino operation. But the thing is I don't know how a conservative in the land, I don't know how anybody who ever said they were a Tea Party conservative could support a guy who believes that eminent domain abuse by government's a good thing. How could that happen? We have to expunge that from our party. The Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a trial by jury. And you think, who could be against the right to trial by jury? Well, let me think. We had this debate in 2011, and many of you are familiar with this. In 2011, they passed legislation that says that an American citizen can be indefinitely detained without a trial. No lawyer, no trial, nothing. And so I'm having this debate with another senator, and I don't like to name names, but he's from Arizona. So we're having this debate, and I'm incredulous. I'm like, an American citizen could be sent to Guantanamo Bay without a trial? And he says, yes, if they're dangerous. It's like, sort of begs the question, doesn't it? Who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not? And I thought to myself, I was thinking of the times when we've got it wrong. when we put 100,000 Japanese Americans in jail because of who they were and what they looked like during World War II, when we rounded up African Americans during the Civil Rights era, regardless of guilt, when we rounded up Vietnam War protesters, regardless of what they had done, when we eavesdropped on all of their phones, when we got it wrong. And I thought of Richard Jewell. Remember, everybody thought Richard Jewell was the Olympic bomber. Everybody thought he did it. Everybody thought he'd exploded that bomb in Atlanta about 15 or 20 years ago. The problem was he didn't do it. The media, they had to give him money. They gave him back millions of dollars because everybody in the world said he was guilty. But he didn't do it. But the reason you have to have a right to a trial by jury is that imagine if Richard Jewell had been a black man in 1920 in the South. He might not have lived the rest of the day. So we have to be, and we should be, the party of individual liberty, as most of us are, but that also means minority rights. And you can be a minority because of the color of your skin or the shade of your ideology. You can be a minority because you've ever had an unorthodox thought. I think there's a few of you out there. You can be a minority for a variety of reasons, but that's what the Bill of Rights is about. And I'll finish with one story. The Sixth Amendment says that you have a right to trial by jury and also a speedy trial. Khalif Browder was a 16-year-old black kid from the Bronx. He was accused of a crime and put in Rikers Island for 3 years. Never tried. He was kept in solitary confinement for 2 or 3 years. He was beaten and who knows what else happened to him. He tried to commit suicide in prison. Was finally released, and about 3 or 4 months ago finally did commit suicide. That shouldn't happen in America. And you know what? When we become the party that defends the Sixth Amendment with the same fervor that we defend the Second Amendment, then we're going to rock and roll to victory. We're going to be so big, we will win every election. That's the party I want to be part of, and I hope you do. Thank you. Time for a few questions. Yes. Yeah, I had an interview a couple of days ago with CNBC, they're the ones hosting the debate, and they asked me about Ben Bernanke, and they said, well, he's left the Republican Party because he says you're a bunch of know-nothings. And I said, put him on the stage, I'll debate Ben Bernanke any day of the week. And if Ben Bernanke were on the stage, here's what I'd tell him, and here's what I'd ask him. Conservatives are pretty good. Most economists are pretty good, and they say prices should be controlled. Price controls, that's the mechanism by which information is transmitted through the market economy. And when you fix prices like they did in the Soviet Union, I always tell people the Soviet Union was defeated because they tried to fix the price of bread and they couldn't figure it out. If the price was too low, the bread was gone. If the price was too high, the bread rotted on the shelves. Only the market can figure out prices. But what does Ben Bernanke not understand? He'd probably agree with me. He'd be nodding his head yes, and then I would say to him, what about the price of money? The price of money is interest rates, and they should freely fluctuate. The Federal Reserve has distorted them beyond belief for a dozen years or more, and that leads to distortion in the marketplace. Interest rates are a little bit like, in medicine we have something called homeostasis. When you eat a meal, which you've all just eaten a big meal, your blood sugar is going through the roof right now. Insulin's coming right after it, and it brings it down. So you have a cyclical, counter-cyclical sort of nature to homeostasis or maintenance of balance. The market economy is no different. And I'm oversimplifying this because I'm a physician, so you'll have to excuse me. But as the market heats up and there's more competition for money, the price of the money would rise. And so you may start out at 2 or 3%, and as the market heats up and everybody wants the money, it goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, and then it finds a point at which people slow down, the demand falls, and then the price falls, and it has sort of this cyclical nature that goes back and forth. What happens if you take that out of the market economy? That's what I'd ask Ben Bernanke, and they all say they're so smart. Greenspan's so smart. I don't know, so smart. And when he told, I said, I think they're the same person. Bernanke and Greenspan are the same person, but they claim credit for all the great things during the boom, but they're not willing to be responsible for the bust. Am I right, Mark?
Congressman Jason Chaffetz, not the Speaker of the House issue, but is sponsoring a bill for a federal sales tax of internet sales. Is that something that's also introduced in the Senate, and is that part of a libertarian philosophy?
Yes, it is in the Senate, and it's an equally bad idea in the Senate as it is in the House. The one great thing about the internet is that it has been largely untaxed and unregulated. And people say, oh my goodness, how could it exist without central planning? How did we get here? You know, and it's like, fortunes are being made on the internet because it's not controlled. You talk to any young entrepreneur and you say, do you want to go into banking or be a physician or healthcare like that? No, they're dying because government's all over these industries, but the internet was free. It still is largely free. So I'm against an internet tax and we'll fight against it. I'm fine with, if you have a brick and mortar store and you say it's unfair that they don't pay taxes, I try to bring yours down to equal them rather than bring theirs up to equal yours. And one other thing I'd add on that, this is my same point on, there's the people they call private equity, which of course I know nothing about because I'm not poor enough to be in private equity or rich enough. But anyway, private equity funds, they make their money and they're taxed at about 15%. And so I think Trump and Bush and others have said they want to bring up that 15% because it's not fair that these people pay 15%. You know what I do? The opposite. If you're paying 39%, I take you down to 15%. Everybody would pay 15%.
If elected president, would you pardon Edward Snowden?
There's always got to be an easy question. I know most people would want me to say yes. And part of me says yes, and part of me says that we cannot have no rules. So for example, we do have secrets, maybe too many, but we do have secrets that need to be protected. We have operatives who try to risk their lives to defend our country, and you know, he didn't reveal that, but you don't want people to reveal things like that. He revealed a program that we probably would have never known about, you know, had not he revealed it, because the government was lying to us. So in many ways you could call him a whistleblower. One of the reasons he said he did not attempt to do it as a whistleblower is, and this I believe is accurate, contractors, which he was, are not protected by the whistleblower statute. Direct employees could have gone to an inspector general and told them what was going on. I think the best compromise on it is that there would be some penalty, but the people who are going nuts, which includes half the people in our party wanting to execute him, shoot him, chop his head off, all this crazy stuff, they're completely wrong. And I think there could be some accommodation. I think he would actually serve some sentence if it were reasonable and it were negotiated. But I've laughingly and sort of flippantly said that he and Clapper could serve in the same prison cell for about 3 years. They both did anything. There are members of the media here, maybe some of them are listening. No, it is difficult, and it's a self-reinforcing cycle. Trump has gotten more attention than probably every candidate on both sides combined and multiplied by 100. And you shouldn't be surprised he's doing well in the polls. people are angry too, and so I think their first gut reaction is to go for something that seems to mirror their anger. I think the media could at any point in time decide to ask more serious questions and not get over, you're ugly, you're short, you're fat, your hair's ugly. I mean, I think I've had all those insults, and it's like, tell me something I can do something about, all right? I can cut my hair, but I can't get any taller. All right? I'm stuck, But we could talk about some more serious things. I felt like the second debate actually got a little farther along. One was longer, so I got 5 minutes in the first debate, but I got 10 minutes in the second debate. So I just want to make sure I'm in all of the debates so I continue to get time. Because I think over time, I think there's an incredibly important debate to have over Syria. See, we've got everybody beating their chest, men and women on the stage wanting to show how strong they are. But we need to know what that kind of, vacant bellicosity, just that I'm bellicose to be bellicose to show that I'm more bellicose than you are, whether or not that's good for our country. And what are the dangers of going over to there right now where Russia's invited by Iraq, Iran, and Syria to come there, to go over there and draw a line and say, if Russia crosses it, we're shooting them down. My goodness, do you know what could happen with that? All for a group of people who largely hate us. Now there are 2 million Christians in Syria, but the thing is the Christians in Syria, if you ask them, who do you wish to have govern you, Assad or ISIS? You know how many votes ISIS will get? 0. They'll all vote for Assad. Now, do they really like him? Probably not. But every one of them, if they were here, you meet Syrian Christians in our country and ask them, Assad or ISIS? But you know how Assad got weaker, and how did ISIS get stronger? Us, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar poured 600 tons of weapons in 2013 alone, and it created a space, and ISIS grew in that space and in that vacuum. And the neocons in our party said, well, we just should have put more in. That was the answer. We just didn't put enough weapons in. We should have had boots on the ground. If we only had 100,000 troops over there, everything would be fine. If we just never left and we'll always stay in the Middle East, it'll be fine. And in reality, I think sometimes it's actually made it worse, that there's more chaos, less stability. All right, one more straight back.
Rand, my daughter and I went to see you when you came to Claremont, and she's 24 years old. And you talked a lot about protecting her privacy. And she said to me afterwards, she said, Mom, I don't really care about my privacy because everything is out on Facebook and everything is out on the internet. I care about the fact that I have, and many of her own age group, has crushing student loans to pay and no jobs. And she said, I'd like to know what Rand wants to do about that.
That's a very good question. I think it's an appropriate and an honest question, and it's too bad Bernie's not here because Bernie says it's free. But there is no such thing as a free lunch. I'm sure you all had to pay for your lunch. Did you give away any free lunches today? No, you have to pay for it. If you don't pay for it, somebody else does. You may not be able to see who purchased something, but somebody always has to purchase it. Now, I think there's a couple of things you have to, or that we ought to have a discussion about. One, why is education so expensive and continue to get more expensive? There are 2 areas, 2 parts of our economy where prices have gone up dramatically, and every other part of the economy, prices are actually forced lower. Healthcare and education. What's common about those? Government, artificially inflates the demand for education and for healthcare, and so the price goes up. One way, if you wanted the prices to come down, you have to take limits off the supply. So education supply is very much limited by accreditation, and you could open up accreditation and allow more of the universities. They're doing the opposite, though. People are fighting against the online universities. Why does it, when you go to the University of New Hampshire and you take an online course, why does it cost the same as sitting there with the professor? Why wouldn't it cost less? It would if there was competition. There's no reason why. See, education online, think about this. The price per pupil could go to nothing almost. Could go to pennies. Could go to $1 if you had 1 million pupils. But we don't have that. See, what if you had, and I really this is I think a big idea for education. We think that people somehow, we bought all our kids smartphones and we think they'll be smarter. But there is something about the internet that connects you to smart people, that the interconnection to smart people, maybe extraordinarily smart people. I want to see the day where the person who can explain calculus better than anybody else doesn't teach 15 kids per class, teaches 15 million in his class, or her class. But as a consequence, the per pupil fee would be reduced dramatically. So that's one part of the answer. That's figuring out the high price of education. The other part of the answer is what can you do immediately for your daughter if she has student loans? I would allow everybody in America, regardless of how much you make, I would allow you to deduct the entire principal and interest for your tuition. It wouldn't be refundable, it would be deducted against your taxes, so it's an encouragement to work. And I will let you do it for your whole work career. Part of the problem is you get out and you make $35,000 a year and you have $200,000 in loan, you don't have income to write off. But what if you made $35,000 a year, maybe up to $70,000 over a working career, and you wrote it off the whole time, a little bit each year? It could help you with taxes. And I'd be more than willing to do that, and we actually have legislation that would do that. Thanks, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Senator Paul again.
We're going down to the honey class.
Hey, Senator, how are you? Katie probably asked you about this already, but I wanted to ask you about Ted Cruz being here and sort of seems like he's making a real play like for your libertarian support.
I think it's good to have more candidates who want to be part of the libertarian wing of the party. I think that's great.
Do you feel like it could actually impact your chances?
No.
And why don't you think that?
I think we're doing very well. You know, there'll be some evidence of it today. There'll be a straw poll. We'll see how the results of that go. But across the country, we monitor it very closely. And both here and Iowa, we know where support is, where our net support was. We can probably the overwhelming majority of it.
Would you support Paul Ryan as Speaker of the House?
What are you doing?
I'm still campaigning to be Speaker. You know, I got one vote last time. No, you think I'd be a good Speaker?
I think you'd be the best ever.
There you go. So there's another vote.
Yeah, so get to it.
No, I think that it'd be good to have somebody really brand new and fresh. I'd like to see somebody that's only been elected a few terms, do something brand new.
Hi there, how are you? Did he say anything particularly interesting before I got there?
We met at a couple of like tea parties.
I'm going to do a video. You can video it too. It's running.
Jump on in there.
Look right here. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
You ready to go? Got a camera? Ready to go? Both of you together?
Okay, well, I'm not
Alright, come on in here.
Okay, great.
Did you happen to get video of this speech?
Yes. I'll publish it.
Share it with me?
Of course.
I got video.
Hi. So that's my channel.
Okay, great.
I filmed them in Milford when after announced. I put a 53-minute video wall to wall. And I also filmed it in Nashville at the town hall recently.
Okay.
And at CPAC at the big government hall. My card is a .com.
All right, let me take a photo of it so I don't forget it. You got it.
And if you go to that.com, you'll see that I'm a trumpet player.
Oh, really?
So I'm an engineer for healthcare. I got a physics degree and 45 years of home tech and all that stuff.
Oh, physics degree.
And I work at a Caucus and that's my day job. And then I've been a professional trumpet player for 25 years. I've played for 50 of them. And I do this. And then I work at home too.
Maybe you can write some campaign music for us.
Definitely.